Riders on the storm, riders on the storm. Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown.
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is my favorite Zelda game. Well, maybe that's because it's the only one I've actually ever completed, and it's actually the only one in the series I've ever owned, to be honest. I've tried emulating Wind Waker on my 2011 MacBook Air a long time ago, and as you could imagine, that didn't really go so well. When I first got my Switch, Breath of the Wild was my only game for a while, and I was basically forced to play it, but since I've gotten more games for my Switch, I haven't really played it until now. Now, I'm what you call a Sonic fan, otherwise known as. And yeah, I enjoy games that are usually like. So when it comes to more laid-back, story-focused games, you could imagine the boredom that comes with it. But when it comes to Breath of the Wild, I was really surprised with how enjoyable the game was, start to finish. While the first few hours of the gameplay is pretty boring, eventually, getting the glider and taking your first steps off the Great Plateau is where the game really begins. Also, this game is a big change of pace for me. So if I complain about really mundane mechanics in the game, that's why. I want to go for a couple points, and trust me when I say I'm no expert, so let's just get to the first one, the music. One thing that being a Sonic fan entails is having a taste for wide ranges of music in video games. I mean seriously, at this point Sonic's reputation is so bad that the only thing holding it up is its soundtracks. Right off the bat, Breath of the Wild's music is fantastic. I mean, I guess the argument could be made that most Nintendo games have great music, but even the Nintendo Wii's goddamn shop music is a classic. The store music is an all-time favorite of fans. Let that sink in for a moment. But I think this game is very unique in that its music isn't the main focus the majority of the time, if ever. The best comparison I could think of would be Minecraft. When you boot up the game and just walk around the world, you won't usually notice the music, but in my mind, that's the genius of the soundtrack. Walking through the ruins and fields of Hyrule while the calm and peaceful melodies flow and transition subtly through the journey is what makes the music of Breath of the Wild special. When it comes to the more grand and noticeable music, I think a perfect example would be the Sheikah Towers. Every time you unlock more of Hyrule with the towers, a grand sweeping melody plays. The other music I'd like to talk about leads into my next point, sound design. I like to talk about some of the things I don't really like about Breath of the Wild. These things aren't annoying enough to ruin the game for me, but they do stand out at times. The one everyone seems to complain about is the rain. I know it's been talked about to death, but holy moly does it rain too much in this game. Everything should be underwater with how often it pours. It's like every time I try to climb a mountain, it just starts raining. It's not a huge deal, like especially once you unlock the flying ability from the bird divine beast thing. It's not really a huge deal, but it's just something that is a little annoying at times. This one I was originally going to complain about, but after I unlocked the Master Sword, it wasn't really a big deal. But some of the bosses have really random attacks and movesets that, more often or not, can one-shot Link, making you start back at your last save. This has led to some of the most frustrating gaming experiences I've ever had, other than Mega Man's approach to difficulty, which is just throwing enemies at you and respawning them as soon as they go off the screen. And I think the last one I'd just like to talk about is the trailing missions. These don't happen a whole bunch, but the most noticeable one I could think of off the top of my head would be the Deku Tree Trial, where you follow the little Kakarot to the shrine. I swear to God, this was the most frustrating for me, and apparently me alone. I don't care how far I was, this little guy could spot Link from a mile away, and every time he does, you spawn back at the start of the Lost Woods. There's a point where he thinks he sees Link, but it was just a shadow, and I think that nearly gave me a heart attack. Those were just the most noticeable things off the top of my head that I could remember not liking, but once you pass them, they're pretty easy to overlook. And back to my second point was the sound design. I genuinely mean it when I say Breath of the Wild has the best sound design in a game I've ever heard. The way your equipment clanks on your back as you run, the sound of your footsteps trudge against the terrain as the wind blows past while calm piano melodies drift through the air, makes playing this game with headphones a freaking delight. Most of this isn't noticeable if you're just rushing through the game, and that's fine, but I seriously recommend taking this game slow. The amount of stuff I missed that I otherwise wouldn't have just by taking it slow really takes a lot of the spectacle and enjoyment out of this game. Even the smaller things like picking up an ancient part or food feels awesome with the incredible sounds put into the game. On a side note, I think I could just listen to the Nintendo sound effects all day. Even the Switch menu sounds are awesome.
Yeah.
I think the only way I can truly describe it is if you actually play the game by yourself. You could look up some soundtracks on YouTube, but I think experiencing it for yourself is the only really way to convey and show people just how masterful the sound design is. One thing I can show you, however, is the graphics. I don't think I need to tell you this game is beautiful. The visuals communicate it better than my words ever could. There were times when I was confused on how they actually got this game to run on Switch. When looking closer into it, the cracks are a bit more visible, however the mix of bloom and cel shading that helps a rather low poly game look outstanding. Instead of half-assing it, they worked with what they had to make one of the best looking games of the year despite the limited hardware compared to the PC and other home consoles such as the PS4 and Xbox One. One issue that comes to mind is the frustrating frame rate. Breath of the Wild is pretty good at keeping a steady 60 FPS, but in rare occasions it dips into the 20s and 10s. One of the most notable examples is the Karak Forest. When entering the area near the Deku Tree, the FPS tanks for a couple of seconds while the Switch fails to keep up. Come to think of it, I really do not like the Karak Forest. I'm just noticing that now. Man, that place really sucks. Other than like the actual look of it, I just hate that place. Ignoring all these small instances, I think Breath of the Wild is one of the best looking games on Switch, if not of that year in 2017. And I'm so glad that it won Game of the Year of 2017 because it definitely deserves it. I let this game sit in my library for over a year and I never really gave it a chance because I thought the beginning was boring. Now that I've experienced the full game and have beat almost half the shrines, I can firmly say this is one of my favorite games on the Switch, and it's definitely my favorite open world game of all time.
この世界のねじれた仕掛け解き明かした愛主体